And union leaders are holding a news conference at Queen's Park about the closure of consumption sites in Ontario. Let's go live to Queen's Park.
Prepared to administer naloxone. And you shouldn't have to, but closing essential health facilities means more 911 calls that could have been diverted, more overdoses at our job sites, in our public parks, in our community centers, in our library bathrooms, leaving workers to respond to critical health emergencies that could be prevented. We are in a public health crisis being driven by toxic drug supply and opioid overdose rates. Closing supervised consumption sites takes our hands off of the wheel and discards decades of research and evidence-based inquiry that shows they work. These cuts will kill. We must do everything in our power to reverse course before the deadly consequences are on our doorstep. It is time to force this choice back onto the Ford government and to value the lives of all Ontarians and all workers. Thank you.
Thank you, JP. Finally, I would like to invite Fred Hahn, President of CUPE Ontario.
As you just heard, I'm Fred Hahn, President of CUPE Ontario. We represent 290,000 members in literally every corner of the province. And make no mistake, the urgent need for safe consumption site supports is an issue across Ontario. From Kenora to Cornwall, from Brockville to Brantford, the loss of services is having an increasingly devastating effect on our communities. I want to thank everyone who's spoken out today so clearly about the dangers of the Ford Conservatives' decision to close safe consumption sites and what a mistake it is to sideline the voices of community members and frontline workers. We need to be clear that Conservative ideology and pandering to baseless fear is putting our communities at risk. Everyday people are dying from toxic drug death. The entire Conservative caucus is blatantly ignoring the mounds of evidence-based research, policies and practices, and the urgent voice of advocates in communities and those who work in the sector when it comes to the urgent need for these life-saving services. Community groups and unions have a long history of fighting together to achieve safe consumption sites. In 2017, people were dying on the streets because of the opioid crisis. They were dying because the government of the day was ideologically opposed to the concept of harm reduction. So a collective of more than 170 volunteers set up tents in Moss Park in Toronto to provide safe injection services. They were harm reduction advocates, saving lives of marginalized and vulnerable people who were at risk of death multiple times a day. CUPE Ontario had members among those volunteers. We listened to them and we supported them. And like them, we didn't wait for leadership to come from government. When the weather turned cold, we provided a big winterized trailer to replace those tents. The trailer allowed the volunteers to continue life-saving work that they were doing in that park. And in 2018, the Toronto Overdose Prevention Society opened a permanent safe consumption site across the street from that park. It took the courage of hundreds of volunteers and supports from unions like ours to shame the government into stepping up. Months of action, months of resistance, and in the end, it forced politicians to take action to provide supports that would address the opioid crisis. When the Ford Conservatives were first elected in 2018, Doug Ford said he wouldn't allow any more support for safe injection sites and overdose prevention. He was wrong then. With this campaign, through this open letter, we're here to make it clear that he is wrong again. And we're sending the message that we support harm reduction services because they work. They save lives. And we pledge to keep working together in coalition with activists in communities across the province to stop any ideologically motivated politician to move our communities and our province backwards. Thank you.
Okay, so you just heard from Fred Hahn of CUPE. Just before Fred, we heard from JP Hornick with OPSEU. This is in the call. You see the sign right there. Save our sites or fill your morgues. Again, this is a press conference at Queen's Park about the closure of consumption sites in Ontario.